Well, James Chapman is the head of advocacy at the NGO Scalabrini. James, good afternoon to you. Let me just be very clear at the outset of this. In any country, and particularly in a democracy, dealing with citizenship, immigration and refugees is two things: complicated and controversial. Now, the Minister wants to make big changes. From what we can see in the white paper, how radical will these changes be?
They're quite extensive. Greetings to you, first greetings to you and to all your viewers and listeners from the Scalabrini Center. So probably one of the most extreme changes is the withdrawal from the 1969 African Union Convention on Refugees and the 1951 Geneva Convention on Refugees and its protocol. So withdrawing from these big international refugee conventions and then looking to perhaps enter into them again with a series of reservations, which could have very far-reaching ramifications for those who fled persecution or war and are seeking protection in South Africa.
The risk also...
there are a number of others. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I do want to stick on this for a minute, if I may. I mean, the risk is that we could decide to leave a convention and then never rejoin it. I mean, that would be a very big thing to do.
No, certainly. That's one of the big issues, because I mean it's quite a process to join the conventions. There's also cognizance of what happens to the population that is currently in South Africa. And has refugee status, protection in the country, and would be at risk of being returned if they withdraw from the conventions. So yeah, there is that risk of not rejoining, and also I mean there's what it looks to the international community, what it has to impact on, say, the principle of non-refoulement, returning people to persecution.
James, this might be quite a technical legal question, so it may well be open to a longer debate, but if you look at the changes that government wants to make and the Minister wants to make, is there actually a need for us to leave the conventions to make those changes? I mean, do the changes we want to make, I suppose, go against the conventions as we're currently joined to them?
So... The simple answer is there is no need to withdraw from the conventions. That's the argument that's been made by a series of different actors who made representations. I think it's a little bit of a understatement and euphemism when the Minister says only a handful of public interest organizations opposed to withdrawal when he made his press statement today on this finalization. Many of us were against it. It makes a mockery of the protections afforded by the conventions, by the Refugees Act, and by the international customary law position that a person cannot be returned to persecution. So even if we were to withdraw, the international position is still the same. It makes no difference. Another argument that is really crucial is that a lot of these cases rest on our constitution. They don't rest on being signatories to the convention. So in practice, it would have very little effect, except in adding more uncertainty and reducing protection. But it wouldn't improve the situation for South Africa. And that's why, and it wouldn't address some of the issues that we put forward as the reasons, like capacity constraints, challenges with implementation, and it taking years on appeal. That wouldn't change by implementing reservations to the conventions.
Okay, let's move on to issues around citizenship. So we know that there are large numbers of people in South Africa who move into South Africa. There are various ways that people do that. There's also a group of people who are here illegally, and you'll know that they're the subject of a lot of conversation in our communities. Is there, under the new system, under what's being proposed in the white paper, a path to citizenship for people? Is that path to citizenship made more difficult with these changes?
Arguably, it does appear so, because it's looking to restrict access beyond the standardized what they call jus sanguinis, based on the basis of blood. It's through your relatives that you get citizenship in the country, but there are other avenues, and those avenues seem to be being reduced as a guidance from the white paper. it is the idea of consolidating legislation in principle is not necessarily a bad one, but if it's consolidation and reducing citizenship rights, and particularly the ramifications it has on making people stateless, I think it's certainly something that should be challenged and shouldn't stand.
There are so many different things, and we know around the world people always move. South Africa, in a way, is made up of different groups of people that have moved. You can't stop that from happening. And yet you do have to have laws to regularize that. Certain things happen when you are the citizen of a country. Countries have every right, and governments have an obligation to defend their borders and sort of know who's coming in and who's coming out. Maybe not what they're up to, but certainly who's coming in and who's coming out. Do you think this law, as it's currently proposed, is actually going to be constitutional? Where I'm going with this is, we know there are political parties that are espousing, or they're accused of espousing, certain forms of xenophobia. People are very angry in some cases with foreign nationals in South Africa. Is what's being proposed at this stage, and I know it's all very new, so different lawyers will have different views on this, is it all constitutional, is what I'm really asking?
No, it's not. I think that it's going to be subject to a series of challenges. It's not in keeping with international law, which is supposed to be applied within the country in terms of our constitution, not in keeping with our constitution. The idea of returning people to die, to be persecuted, subject to cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment, which is the effect of withdrawing from the convention, just as a number one. It's also unconstitutional to go against the right to dignity and the right to work that's afforded to asylum seekers. That is looking to be stripped if you take if you make reservations to the conventions. If you look at the granting of citizenship, and our constitutional court having ruled on that, and then wanted to take that away, again, not constitutional. So there are a series of aspects of this white paper that wouldn't meet constitutional muster.
There's going to be a lot that's going to happen from here. It's going to go to Parliament and there'll be discussions there. Do you think this white paper is going to change significantly before... actually, I need to go back a little bit, James, if you'll excuse my brain's a little slow this afternoon. The department is actually mixing three things together, and they're interrelated: refugee, citizenship, and immigration. Is that the right approach, to mix them all together in one act?
If it was done in a practical, cohesive, clear manner that was affording sort of greater scope for protection, for social cohesion, for economic development, for South Africans and people on the move alike, then in principle, one could consolidate the legislation. And the problem is not about whether you have multiple pieces of legislation or you have one piece with different chapters, as the minister kind of put it across today, but it's the content thereof. It's the curtailing of the rights of people who fled from torture, war, persecution. It is the taking away access to citizenship to people who were born in South Africa and spent over 18 years and now as an adult only know South Africa as their home, and taking away that citizenship avenue. These are the kind of things that are problematic. And it's not a function of the consolidation, but rather about the content within that proposed consolidation.
James Chapman, thank you. Head of Advocacy at the NGO Scalabrini. Really do appreciate the time. I'm sure there are going to be many, many more conversations around these new laws, these new acts, before they become law.